Hey Sage, it's Crystal and Lina. We're here together and we're gonna read to you from Raymond Carver's Cathedral. Oh boy. Somebody's excited. At home, she sat on the sofa with her hands in her coat pockets. Howard closed the door to the child's room. He got the coffee maker going and he found an empty box. He had thought to pick up some of the child's things that were scattered around the living room, but instead he sat down beside her on the sofa, pushed the box to one side, and leaned forward, arms between his knees. He began to weep. She pulled his head over into her lap and patted his shoulder. "He's gone," she said. She kept patting his shoulder. Over his sobs, she could hear the coffee maker hissing in the kitchen. There," she said tenderly. "Howard, he's gone." "He's gone, and now we'll have to get used to that." To being alone, I feel like this dialogue isn't super realistic. In a little while, Howard got up and began moving aimlessly around the room with the box, not putting anything into it, but collecting some things together on the floor at one end of the sofa. She continued to sit with her hands in her coat pockets. Howard put the box down and brought coffee into the living room. Later, Anne made calls to relatives. After each call had been placed and the party had answered, Anne would blurt out a few words and cry for a minute. Then she would explain, quietly, in a measured voice, what had happened and tell them about arrangements. Howard brought the box out to the garage. Where he saw the child's bicycle, he dropped the box and sat down on the pavement beside the bicycle. He took hold of the bicycle awkwardly so that it leaned against his chest. He held it, the rubber pedal sticking into his chest. He gave the wheel a turn. Anne hung up the telephone after talking to her sister. She was looking up another number when the telephone rang. She picked it up on the first ring. "Hello," she said, and she heard someone in the background a humming noise. Something in the background. A humming noise. "Hello," she said. "For God's sake," she said, "who is this? What do you want?" "You're Scotty. I got him ready for you," the man's voice said. "Did you forget him?" "You evil bastard," she shouted into the receiver. "How can you do this, you evil son of a bitch?" "Scotty," the man said. "Have you forgotten about Scotty?" Then the man hung up on her. Howard had heard the shouting and came in to find her with her head in her arms on the table, weeping. He picked up the receiver and listened to the dial tone. Much later, just before midnight, after they'd dealt with many things, the telephone rang again. "You answer it," she said. "Howard, it's him, I know it." They were sitting at the kitchen table with coffee in front of them. Howard had a small glass of whiskey beside his cup. He answered on the third ring. "Hello," he said. "Who is this?" "Hello? Hello." The line went dead. He hung up. Howard said, "Whoever it was." "It was him," she said, "that bastard. I'd like to kill him. I'd like to shoot him and watch him kick," she said. Okay, that's more realistic. "Their kid is dead." "Anne, my God," he said. "Could you hear anything?" she said. "In the background? A noise, machinery, something humming?" "Nothing really, nothing like that," he said. "There wasn't much time. I think there was some radio music." "There's a radio, that's all I could tell." "I don't know what in God's name is going on," he said. She shook her head. If I could get my hands on him." It came to her then. She knew who it was. Scotty. The cake. The telephone number. She pushed the chair away from the table and got up. "Howard, drive me to the shopping center," she said. What are you saying? The shopping center. I know who it is who's calling. I know who it is. It's the baker, the son of a bitch baker. Howard, I had him bake a cake for Scotty's birthday. That's who's calling. That's who has the number and keeps calling us to harass us about the cake. The baker, that bastard. They drove to the shopping center. The sky was clear, the stars were out. It was cold, and they ran the heater in the car. They parked in front of the bakery. All of the shops and stores were closed, but there were cars at the far end of the lot in front of the movie theater. Right, Lena? Yeah, lots of cars. Because they're seeing movies. Right, Lena? The bakery windows were dark, but when they looked through the glass, they could see a light in the back room. Now and then, a big man in an apron moving in the white, even light. In the white, even light. Through the glass, she could see the display cases and some little tables with chairs. She tried the door. She rapped on the glass, but if the baker heard them, he gave no sign. He didn't look in their direction. They drove behind the bakery and parked. They got out of the car. There was a lighted window too high for them to see inside. Oh no, Lena. You wouldn't have been able to see inside either, right, Lena? 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 Right? Yeah. A sign near the back door said the pantry bakery special orders. She could hear faintly a radio playing inside and something creak. An oven door as it was pulled down. She knocked on the door and waited. Then she knocked again, louder. The radio was turned down, and there was a scraping sound now, the distinct sound of something, a drawer being pulled open and closed. Someone unlocked the door and opened it. The baker stood in the light and peered out at them. I'm closed for business, he said. What do you want at this hour? It's midnight. Are you drunk or something? She stepped into the light that fell through the open door. He blinked his heavy eyelids as he recognized her. It's you, he said. It's me, she said. Scotty's mother. This is Scotty's father. We'd like to come in. It's really tense. Really tense story, right, Lena? The baker said, I'm busy now. I have work to do. She had stepped inside the doorway anyway. Howard came in behind her. The baker moved back. It smells like a bakery in here. Doesn't it smell like a bakery in here, Howard? What do you want? The baker said. Maybe you want your cake, that's it. You decided you want your cake? You ordered a cake, didn't you? You're pretty smart for a baker, she said. Howard, this is the man who's been calling us. She clenched her fists. She stared at him fiercely. There was a deep burning inside her, an anger that made her feel larger than herself, larger than either of these men. Just a minute here, the baker said. You want to pick up your 3-day-old cake? That it? I don't want to argue with you, lady. It's over there, getting stale. I'll give it to you for half what I quoted you. No, you want it? You can have it. It's no good to me. No good to anyone now. It cost me time and money to make that cake. If you want it, okay. If you don't, that's okay too. I have to get back to work. He looked at them and rolled his tongue behind his teeth. Like that. More cakes, she said. She knew she was in control of it, of what was increasing in her. She was calm. Lady, I work 16 hours a day in this place to earn a living, the baker said. He wiped his hands on his apron. I work night and day in here, trying to make ends meet. A look crossed Anne's face that made the baker move back and say, no trouble now. He reached the counter and picked up a rolling pin with his right hand and began to tap it on the palm of his other hand. Do you want the cake or not? I have to get back to work. Bakers work at night, he said again. His eyes were small, mean-looking, she thought, nearly lost in the bristly flesh around his cheeks. His neck was thick with fat. I know bakers work at night, Anne said. They make phone calls at night, too, you bastard. The baker continued to tap the rolling pin in his hand. He glanced at Howard. Careful, he said to Howard. My son's dead, she said, with a cold, evil finality. He was hit by a car on Monday morning. Oh, Lena. That's sad. We've been waiting with him until he died, but of course you can't be expected to know that, could you? Bakers don't know everything, do they, Mr. Baker? But he's dead, you bastard. Just as suddenly as it had all welled in her, the anger dwindled, gave away to something else, a dizzy nausea. She pushed against the wooden table, sprinkled with flour, put her hands over her face, and began to cry, her shoulders rocking back and forth. "It isn't fair," she said. "It isn't fair." Howard put his hand at the small of her back. He looked at the baker. "Shame on you," Howard said. "Shame." The baker put the rolling pin back on the counter. He undid his apron and threw it on the counter. He looked at them, and then he shook his head slowly. He pulled a chair out from under the card table that held papers and receipts, an adding machine, and a telephone directory. "Please sit down," he said. "Let me get you a chair," he said to Howard. "Sit down now, please." The baker went to the front of the shop and returned with 2 little wrought iron chairs. "Please, sit down, you people." Anne wiped her eyes and looked at the baker. "I wanted to kill you," she said. "I wanted you dead."
We love you, Say.